It all began on a quiet Sunday afternoon. The rain tapped gently against the windows as I wandered through my grandfather's old house. He had passed away just a few months earlier, and we were finally beginning the bittersweet task of sorting through his belongings. The attic was the last place anyone wanted to tackle. It smelled of old wood and forgotten time, with cobwebs clinging to every corner. As I climbed up the creaky stairs with a flashlight in hand, I wasn't expecting much. Maybe some old tools, books, or outdated Christmas decorations. But tucked in the farthest corner, half covered by a dusty blanket, I found a large wooden trunk. Its metal edges were rusted, and the leather straps were worn thin from age. Something about it immediately caught my attention. With effort, I prized it open, and inside lay an assortment of objects that didn't quite fit with the rest of the attic clutter. There were stacks of yellowed letters tied with string, black and white photographs of soldiers, and a military uniform, folded with care and topped with a faded cap bearing an unfamiliar insignia. Most surprising of all was a sealed envelope, marked confidential in bold red ink. I sat back on my heels, heart racing. I had always known my grandfather as a quiet, humble man, a gardener, a chess lover, someone who taught me how to skip stones at the lake. But what lay before me hinted at another life entirely. A life full of danger, courage, and secrets long buried beneath time and silence. This wasn't just an attic full of old things. This was the beginning of a story I never knew existed, and I was about to uncover the truth. One letter, one photo, one secret at a time. I drove straight to my grandmother's house, the sealed envelope clutched tightly in my hand. My mind buzzed with questions I didn't know how to ask. She greeted me at the door with her usual warm smile, but the moment she saw what I was holding, her expression changed. She led me into the living room in silence, her eyes fixed on the letter as if it had come back from a forgotten world. "I wondered when someone would find that," she said quietly, settling into her chair. I placed the envelope on the coffee table and hesitated before asking, "Why didn't anyone ever talk about Grandpa's time in the war?" She looked out the window for a long moment before answering. "He didn't want to be remembered for the things he had to do, or the things he had to see. He believed in moving forward, in building a peaceful life after the war. But that doesn't mean he wasn't proud of what he did." From a drawer beneath the cabinet, she pulled out a small wooden box wrapped in a cloth. As she opened it, a faint metallic shimmer caught my eye. Medals, 5 of them, each one unique. One in particular stood out, a star-shaped medal with a blue ribbon and an inscription in tiny engraved letters. I leaned closer to read it. "For bravery beyond duty." "That one," she said, gently picking it up, "was awarded to him for saving lives during a battle I was never allowed to ask about." Her voice trembled slightly as she recounted the little she knew. He had once led a group of soldiers into enemy territory to rescue a wounded unit, defying orders and risking his own life. The mission was never publicly acknowledged, but he received the medal in private, without ceremony or applause. I was stunned. The man I knew as calm, quiet, and always patient was once a fearless leader on a battlefield. I realized I had only ever known a part of who he truly was. My grandfather had buried his past under years of silence, not because he was hiding shame, but because he carried a quiet kind of pride, the kind that didn't seek attention. And now, piece by piece, his story was beginning to come to life. The next morning, I couldn't shake the image of those medals from my mind, or the sealed envelope I still hadn't opened. I needed answers. Real ones. So I took a chance and contacted the local Veteran Affairs office. After a few calls, I was directed to a military historian named Dr. Evans, who specialized in World War II records. I met him at a small museum on the edge of town, a quiet place filled with old uniforms, faded maps, and rusted helmets. As I laid the envelope and a few of my grandfather's letters on the table, Dr. Evans raised an eyebrow. He adjusted his glasses and began examining them with growing interest. "This is rare," he murmured, pointing to a specific letterhead. This insignia belonged to a classified unit that operated behind enemy lines. Most of their missions were top secret, and very little was recorded publicly. He left briefly and returned with a thick binder labeled Operation Wildfire, Confidential. My grandfather's name appeared 3 pages in. According to the file, he had been a field lieutenant who led a covert rescue operation during the final stages of the war. His team had infiltrated enemy territory to extract a group of American prisoners who were presumed dead. The mission was dangerous and Dr. Evans explained. He disobeyed direct orders, but he saved every man. The military couldn't publicly praise him without revealing the operation's details, so they gave him a private medal and sealed the mission in classified records. I sat there in silence, overwhelmed. My grandfather had led a rogue mission to save lives, risking his own career and safety. The man I'd known for his quiet evenings in the garden had once crawled through the dark under enemy fire to rescue others. On the way home, I thought about how he must have carried those memories, never saying a word about what he had done. There was no glory in his voice, no war stories over dinner, only the quiet strength of a man who did what needed to be done and lived the rest of his life with grace and humility. Now it was my turn to honor the legacy he left behind. That night, I finally sat down with the bundle of old letters I had found in the attic. They were fragile, tied with string, and smelled faintly of dust and time. As I untied the bundle and opened the first envelope, I realized I was stepping into my grandfather's world, one filled with the raw emotion of war. The first letter was dated March 17, 1944, and addressed to my grandmother. The handwriting was neat but hurried, as if written under dim light during stolen moments of quiet. My dearest Anna, I don't know where to begin. The days are long, the nights longer, but your face keeps me sane. We lost 2 men this week, good men. I led a patrol last night through territory we were warned not to enter, but we found them, wounded, scared, but alive. I couldn't leave them behind. If something happens to me, tell our son I did my best to be brave. I felt a lump in my throat as I read his words. I never knew he had a son who didn't survive. Another silence he had carried. Letter after letter painted a picture of a man torn between duty and love. He wrote about the fear of not making it home, about the cold, about the burden of command, and about the pain of watching friends fall beside him. But through it all, there was one common thread: his unwavering commitment to protect others. In one entry, he described a specific moment during Operation Wildfire. We crossed the river under moonlight, bullets flying. I told the men to stay down, but I kept moving. I had to reach Sergeant Wallace. He was bleeding badly. When I got to him, he said, "You shouldn't have come." I laughed and said, "That's what friends do." I carried him out on my back. We made it. That was my grandfather. The quiet gardener who made the best tomato soup. The man who never raised his voice. The one who built birdhouses in the backyard. And yet here he was, risking everything for his comrades. As I placed the letters back into the bundle, my heart swelled with pride. These were more than just words on old paper. They were echoes of a life lived with honor, bravery, and quiet sacrifice. He had never told me these stories, but now I could feel them in every line. And I knew they were meant to be remembered. A week later, I stood in the center of the town square, surrounded by people who had known my grandfather only as a gentle soul who waved to neighbors and grew roses in his backyard. Few, if any, knew of the man behind the medals, the man behind the silence. I had spent the past few days organizing a small memorial event, reaching out to local veterans, family friends, and townspeople. I also contacted a few descendants of the soldiers my grandfather had rescued during Operation Wildfire. To my surprise, 2 of them responded and traveled miles just to be here. One of them, a grey-haired man named David, stepped forward to shake my hand. "Your grandfather saved my father's life," he said with tears in his eyes. "If it weren't for him, I wouldn't be standing here today." As people gathered, I stood before a simple podium with my grandfather's medals laid out on a velvet cloth beside me. I took a deep breath and began to speak. My grandfather never told war stories. He never talked about battles or glory. But the letters, the medals and the mission I've uncovered reveal something greater than words. A man who chose courage over comfort, sacrifice over recognition. He didn't need applause. He needed peace, and he earned it. I shared excerpts from his letters, including the one where he wrote about carrying Sergeant Wallace to safety. As I read aloud, I saw people wiping their eyes. Some veterans nodding, others closing their eyes in silent respect. We ended the ceremony with a moment of silence. The local band played a soft rendition of Taps, and the American flag fluttered gently above us. For the first time, my grandfather's story was no longer hidden in a trunk or buried in silence. It was alive, shared, honored, and remembered. Afterward, I placed a framed photo of him in uniform at the base of the town's war memorial, right beside the names of other local heroes. And as I looked at his face, so young, so determined, I whispered, "You deserved this, Grandpa. You always did." From that day forward, I no longer saw him as just the quiet man in the garden. I saw him as he truly was, a silent hero whose legacy would live on, not just in medals or documents, but in the hearts of those who finally knew the truth. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear what happens next, or explore more heartfelt stories like this one, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Your support helps us share more powerful family stories, hidden truths, and emotional journeys. New episodes are released regularly, and you won't want to miss what's coming. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community,